London was a city of shadows and secrets, but in the autumn of '98, a new kind of darkness fell. It started quietly, a whisper on the wind that grew into a scream. The first body was found in Hyde Park, nestled among the fallen leaves like a discarded doll. Young woman, no identification. At first, the brass thought it was an isolated tragedy, perhaps a lover's quarrel gone wrong, just another sad story in a city full of them. They were wrong. This wasn't just a story, it was the opening chapter of a nightmare. The quiet didn't last. A second body, then a third, appeared within days. The city held its breath. A pattern emerged from the horror. All young women, all in their early 20s, all with brown hair. The method was chillingly consistent. Strangulation. No signs of a struggle, which was perhaps the most disturbing detail of all. Each victim was found meticulously posed, arranged with a disturbing sense of care. It wasn't rage, it was something colder. Then we saw the signature. A single red ribbon, tied around the wrist of each woman. A splash of crimson against the pale skin. The knot was always the same. A tight, precise bow, almost like a loop. It spoke of intention, of a deliberate act repeated. The press, in their hunger for a headline, christened him the Ribbon Ripper. The name stuck, a grim label for the terror he unleashed. Fear became the city's air. Women looked over their shoulders, parks emptied after dark. London was choked by dread. We hit walls everywhere we turned. The streets were blind. No CCTV cameras captured anything useful near the scenes. Forensics came up empty. No fingerprints, no trace DNA, nothing left behind but the victims and that damned ribbon. The lack of struggle was baffling. How could someone overpower these women so completely, so silently? It defied logic. Their pockets were empty. No phones, no wallets, no identification. It was like they'd been erased before they were left. The police force was running blind. Leads dried up before they even formed. We were chasing ghosts in a city of millions. Every dead end tightened the knot in my gut. The Ribbon Ripper was out there, moving unseen, leaving only fear in his wake. We needed a break. Something, anything, to pull us out of the darkness. The city was waiting, holding its breath. The pressure was immense. Every day without an arrest felt like a failure, another chance for him to strike again. We reviewed everything, every scrap of information, every detail of the scenes, looking for the one thing we'd missed. It felt like searching for a single grain of sand on an endless beach. The killer was meticulous, careful, almost invisible. The victims had no apparent connection to each other, no shared friends, no common haunts we could find. They were strangers, yet they were chosen. There had to be a reason, a link we weren't seeing. It was maddening. The red ribbon was the only constant, the only deliberate mark left by the killer. It had to mean something. We focused on the ribbon, the material, the color, the way it was tied. It was our only tangible clue. We sent samples to labs, hoping for something, anything. But it was just common satin ribbon, easily bought anywhere. The knot remained the most peculiar detail. It wasn't a standard knot. It had a specific, almost technical look to it. We needed someone who understood knots, not just sailor's knots or climbing knots, but something different, something unique. That's when we brought in Grace Wen. She wasn't a cop. She was a forensic pattern analyst, quiet and sharp. She looked at the photos of the ribbons, her eyes scanning the precise loops and turns of the knot. She saw something we didn't. She spent hours studying it, comparing it to databases of knots, looking for a match, a pattern, a history. She called me late one night, her voice low but urgent. She'd found it. The knot had a name, a specific origin. It was a rare ligature loop knot, not something you'd learn in scouts or on a fishing trip. It was specialized. Its history traced back centuries. It was a knot used in a very particular field, one that dealt with binding and securing. It was a knot used in Victorian medical procedures, specifically for tying off arteries or securing limbs during surgery. That was the break. The killer wasn't just some random monster. He had a background, a skill set, a history tied to medicine. The investigation shifted gears. We stopped looking for a random predator and started looking for someone with medical knowledge. Someone who knew how to tie that specific knot. Someone with a connection to the medical world, past or present. The city still held its breath, but now we had a direction, a narrow path through the fog of fear. We started digging into medical records, looking for anyone who might fit the profile. It was a mountain of paperwork. Hospitals, medical schools, old apothecaries. We cast a wide net, hoping to catch something, anything. The knot was our key. It unlocked a door we didn't even know was there. It gave the killer a potential identity. We were no longer just chasing a monster. We were hunting a man with a specific dark knowledge. The fear was still there, a constant hum beneath the city's surface. But now there was also a flicker of hope. We had a lead, a real lead, for the first time since the nightmare began. We just had to follow it wherever it led, even if it led us into the darkest corners of the city's history. Grace Wen's discovery was the turning point. That peculiar knot wasn't random. It was a signature in plain sight. She identified it as a rare ligature loop knot, a knot with a specific historical purpose. It wasn't a knot you'd pick up casually. It required training, practice, a deliberate understanding of its function. Wen's research pinpointed its use primarily in Victorian-era medical procedures, particularly surgery and anatomy. This wasn't just a killer. This was someone with a background in medicine, or at least a deep fascination with it. The knot was the thread that pulled the case from the abyss of randomness into something tangible. It gave us a direction. It narrowed the field from every soul in London to a specific subset of people with a connection to historical medical practices. We finally had something concrete to work with, a piece of the puzzle that fit, even if it was a grim one. The knot was the killer's undoing. The one detail he couldn't resist leaving behind, perhaps a twisted mark of pride. It was the silent scream from the victims, finally heard through the expertise of a forensic analyst. With the knot identified, our focus shifted dramatically. We needed to find someone with this specific, archaic medical knowledge. We started sifting through records, not just current ones, but historical archives, medical schools, hospitals, even old asylums. A key resource became the Hunterian Museum, a repository of medical artifacts and, more importantly, historical records. We examined lists of students, interns, doctors, even those who had dropped out or been expelled over the years. It was painstaking work, cross-referencing names, looking for anyone who might have the skill, the motive, the darkness. One name surfaced repeatedly in connection with disciplinary actions and expulsions: Dr. Ellis Marwood. Marwood was a disgraced doctor, expelled from the Royal College of Surgeons nearly a decade prior. His expulsion wasn't for incompetence, but for something far more disturbing. He ran an illegal anatomy club. This club operated in the shadows, beneath a Soho pub, using bodies acquired through questionable means. The final straw was the death of a patient during one of his unauthorized experimental procedures in that makeshift lab. Marwood fit the profile. He had the medical background, the knowledge of archaic procedures, and a history of operating outside the law. He had the darkness required to commit these acts. He became our prime suspect. Tracing Marwood wasn't easy. He'd vanished after his expulsion, living off the grid, a ghost in the city. Our intelligence finally placed him near Holborn, in an area known for its old, abandoned buildings. We found him in a derelict apothecary, the air thick with the cloying smell of formaldehyde and decay. The place was a museum of the macabre. Jars filled with preserved specimens lined dusty shelves. Surgical instruments lay scattered on tables. And then we saw her. Another young woman lying on a makeshift operating table, unconscious. A red ribbon was already tied around her wrist. We were moments away from being too late. Marwood emerged from the shadows, a scalpel glinting in his hand. He didn't surrender. He attacked. He moved with a surprising speed, driven by a desperate manic energy. He lunged at the lead detective. A shot rang out. The detective fired, not to kill, but to stop him. The bullet struck Marwood in the shoulder. He crumpled to the floor, the scalpel clattering away. The reign of the ribbon ripper was over. We secured the scene, called for medical help for the victim, and took Marwood into custody. The abandoned apothecary held the grim secrets of his work, the final, horrifying chapter of his obsession. Marwood was taken to the hospital for his wound. Under sedation, perhaps, or simply broken, he began to talk. His motive was as twisted as his methods. He didn't see his victims as people. He saw them as raw material. He spoke of beauty, of perfection, of preservation. He believed true beauty lay in stillness, in being untouched by decay. He wasn't killing them out of rage or lust. He was attempting to create living sculptures. He wanted to capture a moment of perfect beauty and preserve it forever, using his archaic medical knowledge. The red ribbon wasn't just a signature, it was a final flourish, a mark of completion on his grotesque artwork. His mind was a dark, labyrinthine place, where life and death blurred into a horrifying artistic vision. He saw himself as an artist, a creator, not a monster. That was perhaps the most chilling revelation of all. He was trying to stop time, to freeze beauty in its prime, using the most brutal means imaginable. His words painted a picture of a man utterly detached from reality, lost in his own horrifying world. The victims were not individuals to him, but components in his macabre collection, sacrifices to his twisted ideal. Understanding his motive didn't make it any less horrific, but it explained the meticulous posing, the lack of struggle. He wasn't fighting them, he was preparing them for an eternal, silent display. It was a motive born of madness, a perversion of art and science, wrapped in the chilling elegance of a red ribbon. Marwood was apprehended. The city breathed again, slowly, cautiously. The reign of terror had ended. The surviving victim recovered, physically at least. The psychological scars would likely last a lifetime. The case was closed, the killer behind bars. Justice, of a sort, was served. But the shadows lingered. For those of us who worked the case, the images, the fear, they don't just disappear. I still carry one of the red ribbons. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder of the darkness we faced. It's a small piece of satin, but it holds the weight of immense horror, of lives stolen, and a city gripped by fear. The case taught me that evil doesn't always wear rags and lurk in alleys. Sometimes it wears the guise of elegance, of precision. It can hide behind knowledge, behind skill, behind a twisted sense of beauty. It can be meticulous and cold. The red ribbon murders are over, but the feeling they left behind, the knowledge of what people are capable of, that stays with you. The shadows of horror can linger long after the case is closed, a permanent stain on the city's memory and on your own soul. You learn to live with them, but you never forget. The red ribbon is a constant, silent reminder of the darkness that lies beneath the surface. This is the chilling tale of a silence that wasn't empty, but filled with a terrible, ticking dread. It's the story of the clockmaker's silence, a mystery that began with a simple report of a missing person. At its heart were two figures: Clara Gray, a violinist whose music soared with life, and her father, Elias Gray, a man whose world revolved around the precise, predictable mechanisms of time. The central mystery was Clara's sudden, inexplicable disappearance. The narrative begins not with a scream or a struggle, but with the quiet, measured voice of Elias Gray, reporting his daughter missing. A voice that held a strange, unsettling calm. Clara Gray vanished after a late-night concert in Camden Town. One moment she was there, her music echoing in the night. The next, she was gone, leaving only questions in her wake. The first tangible clue wasn't a dropped scarf or a forced door, but something far more peculiar. It was a perfectly functioning antique watch. This watch was found placed with deliberate care on Clara's pillow, as if left as a calling card or a cryptic message. It ticked away the seconds in an otherwise silent room. Elias Gray was the owner of a clock shop in Marylebone, a place filled with the rhythmic pulse of countless timepieces. His life was one of meticulous order and intricate detail. Elias was initially portrayed as a quiet and meticulous man, devoted to his craft and seemingly to his daughter. His shop was a sanctuary of ticking, chiming, and whirring mechanisms. The investigation began quietly, following the standard procedures after Elias filed the missing person report. The police arrived at Clara's flat, expecting signs of forced entry or a struggle. They found nothing of the sort. Clara's flat was undisturbed, neat, almost sterile. It offered no immediate answers, only deepened the mystery. However, tucked away, they discovered Clara's journal, a personal record that promised insight into her final days. The journal revealed chilling details, hinting at a growing unease in Clara's life. Her words spoke of feeling watched, of an unseen presence lurking just beyond her perception. But the journal was incomplete. Several pages were mysteriously torn out, leaving gaps in her narrative, obscuring crucial thoughts or events. The journal hinted strongly at Clara's growing fear of being followed, a shadow that seemed to lengthen with each passing day. It painted a picture of a young woman increasingly isolated by her own dread. As the investigation continued, a pattern of unsettling clues began to develop. These weren't random occurrences but seemed deliberately placed, designed to provoke or communicate. Antique watches, identical in type to the first one found on Clara's pillow, began appearing, each one a small, ticking enigma. One such watch was found in Clara's mailbox, nestled amongst bills and junk mail. It was a stark, anachronistic object in a modern world. Another watch was discovered in her rehearsal hall, placed inside her violin case. It lay there silently, a substitute for the vibrant music that should have filled the space. Perhaps most disturbingly, a watch was placed on the grave of Clara's deceased mother. A cold, calculated gesture that linked the present mystery to a past tragedy. Clara's mother's death had occurred years prior and had been previously ruled an accident. The appearance of the watch on her grave cast a long, dark shadow of doubt over that ruling. With each new discovery, the mounting evidence began to point directly towards Elias Gray. The watches, his strange calm, the connection to the mother's grave. It all began to converge. Elias was confronted with the evidence, piece by piece. The watches, the journal entries, the lack of forced entry at the flat. The questions became sharper, more probing. Under the relentless pressure of the confrontation, Elias Gray finally broke down. The meticulous facade crumbled, revealing the tormented man beneath. In his breakdown, Elias began to reveal the dark truth behind his actions, a truth more horrifying than anyone had imagined. His confession was a descent into a mind warped by grief and control. He confessed to attempting to freeze time around Clara. He spoke of a desperate, twisted desire to control her life, to prevent her from growing away from him, from leaving his orbit. He saw her independence as a threat. He confessed that he snapped when Clara resisted his suffocating control, when she pushed back against his attempts to keep her bound to him and his world of ticking clocks. His actions, he claimed, were driven by a twisted desire to craft a riddle of grief, a complex puzzle designed to immortalize his pain and his control over Clara's fate. The watches were markers in his macabre game. The horrifying climax of the investigation led the police to the clock shop in Marylebone. Elias's confession guided them to the final, terrible secret. Beneath the basement of the shop, amongst the gears, springs, and pendulums, was the discovery of Clara's body. Hidden away, silenced forever, in the heart of her father's world of frozen time. London, a city built on secrets, where the truth is often buried deeper than the foundations of its oldest buildings, especially around Fleet Street. This is a tale from that world, the world of ink-stained fingers and whispered deals. It's a place where information is the only real currency, and silence is bought, sometimes with blood. My story starts, as many grim stories do, with a phone call in the dead of night. A discovery had been made. They found him in a print shop. Not one of the grand, modern houses, but a relic tucked away in a narrow alley off Fleet Street itself. The body belonged to Rupert Lytton. The name meant something in the city. Lytton was a tabloid editor. Notorious was too kind a word. He built his empire on scandal and ruin. The air in that shop was thick. It smelled of stale ink, damp paper, and something else, something metallic and final. The scent of ink usually spoke of stories waiting to be told. Here, it just mingled with the grim reality of violence. He was dead, no doubt about that. The cause was clear enough, even before the official word came down. The weapon wasn't subtle. It was part of the furniture, part of the trade. A printer press, one of the old heavy ones. It was a stark, brutal symbol. It was the very tool of his industry, turned against him. A final, twisted headline. "They called me in. That's what I do. I deal with the messes nobody else wants to touch." The call came just after midnight. A body. Fleet Street adjacent. That was enough to get me moving. Arriving at the scene, the first thing I noticed was the quiet and the lack of disturbance. There were no forced doors, no broken windows, no signs of a struggle that tore the place apart. That detail spoke volumes. It suggested the killer wasn't a stranger breaking in. It meant Lytton likely knew the person who ended his life, or they were let in. It pointed away from a random act. This felt personal, or perhaps chillingly professional. It hinted at a connection, a history, or a carefully laid plan executed with cold precision. We started digging, not through the usual channels at first. We went straight to the source of Lytton's power, his work. His office was upstairs, a chaotic mess of papers and half-empty coffee cups, but his computer was the real prize. We found it buried deep in his files, an unpublished exposé, ready to blow the lid off something big. The target wasn't a celebrity or a politician's affair this time. It was something far more dangerous. It was a private intelligence firm, a ghost in the machine of London's power structure. This firm wasn't just operating in the shadows. It had deep, undeniable ties to Parliament itself. Lytton's story was poised to expose sensitive information. Information that powerful people wanted kept hidden. Permanently. This wasn't a crime of passion fueled by rage or revenge over a published story. That much became instantly clear. This was a calculated act, a silencing, a preemptive strike against the truth. Lytton hadn't just printed secrets. He'd stumbled onto one that was guarded with lethal force. The motive was clear, but the killer wasn't walking around with a sign. We needed a thread to pull. We found it near the back entrance of the print shop, discarded, a burner phone. These things are ghosts. Untraceable, disposable, a common tool for those who operate outside the lines. But even ghosts leave faint trails. We worked the phone, piecing together its brief clandestine life. The calls led us down a rabbit hole, not to the intelligence firm directly, but to someone connected. The phone's activity linked back to a name, a former MI5 operative, someone trained in making problems disappear. He wasn't working for the government anymore. His skills were now for hire, in the lucrative world of private security. He fit the profile, professional, capable of getting in and out unseen, motivated by payment, not passion. We brought him in. The interrogation room is a place where walls feel closer and time stretches thin. 3 hours. That's how long it took. 3 hours of questions, silence, and the weight of what he'd done. He finally cracked. The professional facade crumbled, revealing something cold and empty underneath. He confessed. The words were flat, devoid of emotion. He admitted to killing Lytton. His reason? Simple, chilling. He said Lytton had gone too far, stepped over a line he wasn't supposed to cross. The confession provided a form of closure for the case file. The killer was identified, the motive understood. But justice? That felt ambiguous. A hired gun caught, while the puppet masters remained in the shadows. This case wasn't just about a dead editor. It was a reflection of something deeper. It showed the complex power dynamics at play in this city, the hidden agendas that dictate who lives and who dies. I left Fleet Street that night as the fog rolled in, thick and gray, swallowing the streetlights. A sense of unease clung to me, heavier than the damp air. The case was closed, but it didn't feel finished. Walking away, I couldn't help but feel like someone was watching, like the eyes of the city were on my back. It implied that the story wasn't over, that the deeper implications of Lytton's expose were still out there, unresolved. It left a lingering paranoia, a feeling that the truth was still hidden, just out of sight. An unsettling realization settled in. The shadows of Fleet Street held secrets, secrets that might never fully come to light. The call came just before dawn, the kind of call that pulls you from a restless sleep and drops you into the cold reality of the city's underbelly. They found her in the Thames. Beneath the skeletal structure of Blackfriars Bridge, the river held its latest secret, a body, tangled in the debris the tide leaves behind. It was Dr. Amelia Brandt, a name that carried weight in certain circles. She wasn't just anyone. Brandt was a forensic psychologist, sharp as broken glass. Her work put her in the path of monsters, consulting on the kind of high-profile homicides that kept the city awake at night. The initial report from the ME painted a grim picture. Cause of death, exsanguination, bled dry, no water in the lungs, a crucial detail. It meant she wasn't alive when she went into the river. She was dead before the cold water claimed her. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. A calculated act of violence. The method itself felt theatrical, like a statement. At first glance, it felt random. Another soul lost to the city's indifference or a moment of madness. But the job teaches you to look closer, to follow the threads, no matter how thin. The investigation shifted. We started digging into Brandt's life, her work, her final case. It led us back 2 years, to an unsolved triple murder. 3 women killed in Brixton, a case that had gone cold, leaving a scar on the city. They were found posed, like macabre dolls in a twisted display. And the killer left a signature, tarot cards, one with each victim. Brandt hadn't just consulted on that case, she'd gone public. Weeks before her death, she'd appeared on television, challenging the killer directly, daring him to step out of the shadows. Now the signature was back, a tarot card. Found with Brandt, a chilling echo of the Brixton murders. The card was justice, a cruel irony for a woman who sought it for others. And its placement, it was in her mouth, a final silencing gesture. Then, the killer started communicating. Not with the press, not with the public, with me. Handwritten notes, delivered anonymously. The content was unsettling. Quotes from Shakespeare, cryptic, layered. They weren't just taunts. They were clues, a signal that this was a game, and I was now playing. We cross-referenced Brandt's case files. Every suspect, every witness, every name that touched the Brixton case. One name surfaced repeatedly, a man questioned, but never charged. He was a failed actor, the kind who saw the world as a stage and himself as the lead. He'd fallen on hard times, ended up driving a taxi, a ghost in the city's traffic. He'd been questioned extensively in the Brixton murders. His alibi held, barely, but something about him never sat right. A darkness behind the eyes. He'd vanished weeks before Brandt's murder, dropped off the grid. We tracked him through the city's veins, following breadcrumbs of old haunts, forgotten connections. It led us to Soho, to an abandoned theater, a place where dreams went to die, and where this twisted drama was about to reach its final act. They call it the Glass Widow, or sometimes the Widow in the Glass Tower. It's a chilling tale whispered in the hushed, sterile halls of high finance. A story born from concrete, steel, and a single fatal drop. The setting was as cold and sharp as the crime itself. A brutalist high-rise, all angles and reflective surfaces, piercing the London sky. Specifically, the 14th floor, a window overlooking the sprawling, indifferent landscape of Canary Wharf. The victim was Gareth Ellis, a name synonymous with disruption, innovation, and ruthless acquisition in the tech world. A magnate. His end was abrupt, final, a fall from that very window. I was the one they sent, an unnamed investigator in a world of named players. My job was to make sense of the senseless. I found her there, Marianne Ellis, the widow, standing by the open window, a silhouette against the city lights. Her demeanor was unnerving, stoic, calm, as if she were contemplating the view, not the void where her husband had just been. The initial report was simple, brutal. Gareth Ellis was pushed. But the circumstances complicated everything. The door to the office was locked from the inside. There were no signs of a struggle. Not a chair overturned, not a paper out of place. No forced entry. The security system was state-of-the-art, and it hadn't screamed. Only Marianne's fingerprints were found on the window frame, hers and the victim's, and her composure. It was too perfect, too still, too calm for a woman who had just witnessed her husband's violent death. My focus shifted immediately. Not just on the fall, but on the life that led to it. Gareth Ellis lived in a world of cutthroat business dealings. His empire was built on innovation, yes, but also on broken partnerships and discarded rivals. A digital battlefield. Marianne herself offered the first breadcrumb. She stated, without emotion, that Gareth had enemies, many of them. She added that in his world, business and betrayal went hand in hand. A simple truth, delivered like a cold fact. Her own position was frustratingly solid. Her alibi for the moments leading up to the event was airtight. Witnesses placed her elsewhere in the building, then returning just before. And her silence on the specifics of the fall was equally impenetrable. She saw nothing, heard nothing, knew nothing, she claimed. My next step was to peel back the layers of his professional life. Interviewing the staff was like sifting through sand, hoping for a grain of truth. Gareth's assistant was a bundle of nerves. He fidgeted, avoided eye contact, spoke in hushed tones. He revealed Gareth's recent state of mind, a growing paranoia, a sense of being watched, targeted. He mentioned Gareth talking about a code, not just software, but something more fundamental, more dangerous, a master key. He also spoke of a kill switch, a term Gareth used not for a system shutdown, but for something personal, something final. Then there was the former security guard, a man who had mysteriously quit his high-paying job just 2 days before the murder. It took some digging to track him down. He was reluctant to talk, scared, but he eventually recounted Gareth confiding in him. Late nights, nervous energy, vague threats. He revealed a break-in. Not reported, not logged. It happened about a week prior to the murder. Gareth believed it was the work of a former partner, an enemy he had wronged, someone he had erased. The break-in was clean. Nothing seemed stolen, nothing obviously disturbed. It left no trace. I went back to the basics. The building's digital nervous system, the elevator footage. I reviewed hours of it, looking for anyone entering or exiting the 14th floor around the time of death. There was no one. But there was a crucial detail I almost missed. A mail delivery. A courier arriving on the 14th floor. The timing was precise. The delivery occurred just moments before Gareth's death. 9:47 p.m. Gareth's time of death was logged at 9:48 p.m., 1 minute after the package arrived. The package wasn't just mail, its content was specific, a modified drone, not a toy. This machine was capable of controlled flight within the confines of an office, and it wasn't unarmed. It was equipped with a deadly spike, a precision instrument of death. This is how it happened. Gareth Ellis opened the package, curiosity perhaps, or expecting something else entirely. The drone was controlled remotely, from outside the building, a ghost in the machine, guided by a hand far away. It was a machine that killed like a ghost, silent, unseen, leaving no trace of its operator within the locked room. The investigation led to a name, Bruno Mallory. Mallory was Gareth's former CTO, the technical brains behind much of Ellis's early success. Gareth had fired him. Not just fired, but systematically erased him from the company's history, his contributions scrubbed from the records. A digital assassination before the physical one. And Marianne? She knew the truth. She knew about Mallory. She knew about the break-in. She knew about the paranoia. She didn't push him. The drone did the killing. She simply allowed the events to unfold. She waited. Waited for the inevitable consequence of her husband's actions to arrive in a package. She watched as the machine did its work. And when it was done, she stood by the window, calm. Her direct involvement was passive. She did not initiate the final act. Her outcome was anything but passive. She inherited everything. Her husband's fortune, his empire. Marianne Ellis was not the killer. Not in the conventional sense. She didn't deliver the final push. A machine did that. But she was far from innocent. She was a silent accomplice. She watched as the drone, a product of the very tech world her husband mastered and corrupted, carried out the deadly deed. And she let it happen.